Hi, this is Remembering the Past with Corey Franklin, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with Robert Bork, who died recently at the age of 85. The short story is that when Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell retired in 1987, Robert Bork was nominated by President Ronald Reagan to take that seat on the Supreme Court, and the Senate rejected his nomination. But the situation was far more complicated than that. Robert Bork, who no one would argue is an unintelligent man, was thoroughly conservative. He remained a hero to the conservatives, he remained bête noir to the liberals, and the battle over his nomination was one of those seminal events in American politics. He didn't have the vote for confirmation. The seat ultimately went to Justice Anthony Kennedy, but the issues that were fought about in 1987 still remain today. Since this isn't a political program, we're going to remain as neutral as we can on Justice Bork. I will present a clip of his life story that was prepared by a conservative group, so it leans conservative, but you can take it for what it's worth. As I said, he was unarguably a brilliant man and jurist, but I'll let you decide.
Born into a modest Pittsburgh household in 1927, Bork was groomed to be an independent thinker by his mother, who passed on her keen intellectual curiosity. Even as a boy, Bork enjoyed standing outside the mainstream. While other kids practiced their curveball, Bork studied socialism. Still, he was one of the boys, editor of the school paper, and a champion boxer.
He's a pugilist in pretty much everything he does. I think my father was a boxer before he learned about boxing, and I think he's been a boxer ever since, even after retiring from the ring.
After hanging up his boxing gloves, Bork decided to serve his country. He joined the Marines, but only after convincing a very tough opponent, his mother. Then in 1947, he landed at the University of Chicago.
He's always been someone who wants to explore ideas and search for truth. I think is where he learned what he wanted to do, which was to wreak himself upon the world, to be involved in ideas, and that's really what it's all about for him.
After graduation, Bork planned to attend Columbia School of Journalism and become a writer. When Columbia didn't recognize his undergraduate degree, he turned instead to the University of Chicago Law School, where mentors Ed Levy and Aaron Director helped to further shape his ideas about the world. By 1956, Bork had married his college sweetheart, Claire Davidson, and was a successful antitrust specialist in Chicago. But by the early 60s, the humdrum life at a law firm had lost its spark. The fighter, the explorer, was unfulfilled. So when Yale offered him a position as an assistant professor in 1962, he loaded the family in the Chevy and headed to New Haven. At Yale, Bork was a respected professor of antitrust law. He later branched into an area of study that would become his trademark, constitutional law. Inspired by fellow professor Alex Bickel, Bork's theories ultimately set the stage for debate on judicial philosophy and constitutional interpretation.
Judge Bork was the first major scholar to endorse originalism and judicial restraint, and to do it with great force and great effectiveness.
He has been the one who has said, judges, if they aren't tied to the Constitution, they're not tied to anything. It sounds like a fairly straightforward point, but the fact of the matter is, Judge Bork has been the one to bring that front and center.
There is no one who has articulated the conservative point of view on the Constitution more or better than Judge Bork.
In 1972, a Bork article for the New Republic entitled "Why I Am for Nixon" caught the eye of the administration, and soon he had a new job, U.S. Solicitor General. But any excitement over his new position was short-lived. 4 months later, amid the rising Watergate scandal, he was immersed in what would become known as the infamous Saturday Night Massacre. When Nixon demanded the dismissal of Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, both the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General resigned rather than comply. New hire Bork was next in line, with no one below in the chain of command. Believing Nixon had the legal authority to fire Cox, Bork handed out the pink slip.
People had so much respect for his integrity. They know he had done what the president had the power to order to be done, and yet he had the integrity to stand up to the White House and to insist that the Watergate Special Prosecutor's Office be held together.
Bork was instrumental in finding a replacement for Cox, Leon Jaworski. Having calmed the storm, he stayed with the Justice Department through the end of the Ford administration. His sense of humor no worse for the wear.
He was always going off to give a speech someplace or another, and he had a standard line, which was that during the turbulent period of the 1960s, when
the University of California at Berkeley was sending the radicals down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to the colleges of the East. He thought the greatest hope for higher education in America was the San Andreas Fault.
When President Carter took office, Bork returned to Yale, where he finished his first book, The Antitrust Paradox, A Policy at War with Itself, which revolutionized the field.
I couldn't understand my antitrust course when I took it at Harvard. It didn't seem to me to make sense, and it was only after I read Bob's book that I realized I was right. He really did bring keen intellectual insight into that field.
After his wife Claire passed of cancer in late 1980, Bork returned to D.C., this time in private practice. But no sooner had he moved into his new law office than President Ronald Reagan appointed him to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. While his reputation as a tough lawyer preceded him, any preconceived notions that Judge Robert Bork was straight-laced and predictable were soon put to rest.
Everyone who knows him notes his sense of humor. He is absolutely hilarious. And here's one of the acid tests. Those who worked with him adored him.
He was incredibly open-minded. People have this impression of him as having strong views, and on certain issues he certainly did. But I remember there were many times when he would be willing to reconsider even an opinion that he had issued.
By the mid-'80s, Judge Bork's outspoken opinions on judicial restraint and original intent put him at the top of the list for a Reagan Supreme Court nomination. So it was no surprise that when Justice Lewis Powell stepped down from the bench in June of 1987, Reagan called on his judicial heavyweight, Judge Robert Bork. The timing was significant.
The Democrats had just taken control of the Senate. Secondly, you had a lot of left-wing groups that were very much energized because of the critical position of Justice Powell's vacancy there in terms of the makeup of between those who were judicial activists and those who were faithful to the Constitution.
Conservatives in one corner, liberals in the other. When the bell sounded, the country was in for the Supreme Court bout of the century.
These left-wing groups, aided and abetted by some of the leftist senators, turned it from a confirmation process really into a political extravaganza.
His confirmation was a great education if people were listening to what he was saying, but it's also great education in how vicious and underhanded politics can be.
After weeks of testimony and hearings, the opposition had accomplished what it set out to do. But Bork was not about to throw in the towel without one final round.
The question was whether his name should be withdrawn or whether he should proceed and challenge the Senate to a vote. And Judge Bork very heroically, in my opinion, very courageously said, we ought to put it to a vote and make the Senate account for itself on this particular issue.
As expected, the vote went against Bork's confirmation, but a critical democratic principle had been upheld. Bork's wife, Mary Ellen, was inspired by his courage.
When it was over with, we both said, we were probably much stronger persons for having gone through it. And it made you realize that some things really are worth fighting about.
It would have been much better to have had Bob on the Supreme Court these last 20 years, but the presentation Bob made, the gallant presentation, against the flaccid mainstream consensus of the time, simply broadened what is discussable, and that is a public service beyond price.
The following year, Judge Bork hung up his D.C. Circuit robe, but continued his service to the country in other ways. He served as a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy Research and as a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Currently, he is also a professor at Ave Maria School of Law and, of course, a long-standing co-chairman of the Board of Visitors of the Federalist Society, which he helped get off the ground.
Judge Bork gave the keynote speech at our very first conference in April of 1982, and he really gave us a vital, push in getting the organization started.
Since leaving the bench, Bork has penned critical books exposing trends in the court system and American society. Coercing Virtue, which takes on international law and its effect on American sovereignty, and two bestsellers, The Tempting of America, which further defines his groundbreaking opinions on judicial philosophy and original intent, and Slouching Towards Gomorrah, which underscores decline in our society. A brilliant author, renowned legal scholar, esteemed judge. Robert Bork has put his larger-than-life stamp on American culture. As such, he's captured the attention of a nation. He's been spoofed by such heavy hitters as The Simpsons and Star Trek, is the inspiration for comic book heroes and villains. But perhaps his deepest foray into pop culture is found in the dictionary. Bork, verb, obstruct someone, especially a candidate for public office, through systematic defamation or vilification.
Well, Dad likes to say that the having your last name as a verb is a form of immortality. I think it's funny and a conversation starter, but I think what it really means is you stood up for what you believed in, and you don't kowtow to anybody. And if they want to take their best shot at you and work you over, well, that's their business, but you're true to yourself. And I think he's been that way, and he's taught us that too.
A fighter, an explorer, a man of principle.
Well, the Robert Bork story could be debated ad infinitum, and rather than do that, I'll refer you to the history books on him. However you feel, you cannot argue that you can't write the history of American politics in the second half of the 20th century without mentioning the name Robert Bork. We're going to move on now to Charles Durning, who died recently at the age of 89. Great character actor. I first saw him before he got into movies when he was on Broadway in Jason Miller's That Championship season in the early 70s. He did a wonderful job, and he moved on from there into The Sting and to become a top actor in movies. What many people don't know is that he was a decorated war hero in World War II on top of that. Here's a report on Charles Durning's life.
Charles Durning was born on February 28, 1923, near West Point in Highland Falls, New York. The second youngest of 10 siblings, he enlisted in the United States Army at 18, and he quickly found himself on the World War II battlefields of Europe. Full of guts and patriotic ambition, the young Ranger Staff Sergeant fought in two of history's greatest battles, the Battle of the Bulge and D-Day.
Charles Durning isn't just an amazing actor, he's a true American hero, having been awarded the Silver Star Medal, the Bronze Star Medal, and 3 Purple Hearts for his bravery in the Second World War. To this day, he flies to Washington, D.C. every single Memorial Day in order to perform on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol as a tribute to the men and women who fight for our country.
After the war, Charlie went back to New York, but not Highland Falls. He moved to Hell's Kitchen in New York City to become an actor. Famed Hollywood director George Roy Hill found Charlie's performance in the Pulitzer Prize-winning Broadway production of That Championship Season. Charlie impressed George Roy Hill so much that he cast him opposite Paul Newman and Robert Redford in The Sting.
You the owner in here? That's good. Lieutenant Snyder, bulk up.
After The Sting, every producer and director in Hollywood wanted Charlie in their cast. Through his career, he has assembled an incredible list of some of the most memorable performances on the big screen.
Officer Clifford in when a stranger calls.
Lieutenant Snyder in The Sting.
Sergeant Moretti in Dog Day Afternoon.
Chief Brandon and Dick Tracy.
I absolutely love them as Pappy O'Daniel, the crazy governor from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He stole that show.
Charles Durning is the perfect cop. No one is more real.
The best little whorehouse in Texas. A tap dancing governor.
The newspaper editor in One Fine Day. Just great acting.
He's played a Kennedy, a priest, a lawyer, and even Santa Claus.
How about that poor dad in Tootsie, thinking Dustin Hoffman was a woman?
In 1983, Charles Durning was nominated for an Academy Award for his role of the governor in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. The very next year, he was again nominated for an Oscar for his acting performance in To Be or Not to Be. In 1990, he won the Tony Award for Best Actor, playing Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And he's won or been nominated for 8 Golden Globes and 12 Emmys, most recently earning an Emmy nomination in 2005 for CBS's NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigation Service.
His total body of work and his contribution to this country are outstanding.
Well, as you heard, it would be hard to enumerate all the movies that Charles Durning's been in and give you clips from all of them, but I picked a couple of good ones. Here's a real brief snip from The Sting as he leads Robert Shaw away after The Sting is completed.
Lieutenant Snyder, bulk up.
Come on! Gotta get you out of here! Come on! But my buddy's in there! There's a couple of dead guys in there, too. You can't get mixed up in that.
That's good stuff. Here he is with Dustin Hoffman at the bar in Tootsie, after he finds out that Dustin Hoffman's not a she but a he.
I thought you'd want it back. Outside. Give it to me outside. Why'd you do it? I needed the work. The only reason you're still living is because I never kissed you. I hope you enjoyed the chocolates. I gave them to a girl. So did I thought. You like them? Chocolates? Girls. I like Julie. I think I love Julie. Wearing a dress is a funny way to show it. I know. Truth is, you were okay company. So are you. I could have done without the dancing. You're very good. I'm seeing a real nice woman now. Oh, really? Think I didn't check her out? I buy you a beer? You got sixpence, yeah. Can I have a couple beers?
That's a great scene. He liked to play New York or Chicago tough guys and cops, but he was great with crooked Southern politicians too. Here he is in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas in a musical number, and he actually did a great jig in this one also.
I love to dance a little sidestep. Now they see me, now they don't have come and gone. I love to sweep around the white step, put a little swat and leave the people alone. Now, good friends, it behooves me to be solemn and declare I'm for goodness and for profit and for living clean and saying daily prayer
And here he is as a shady Southern governor in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Great state of Mississippi. Happy you're down, your governor. Want to thank the Soggy Bottom Boys for their wonderful performance. And it looks like the only man in this great state who ain't a music lover is my esteemed opponent in the upcoming, Homer Stokes. Sounded to me like he was harboring some kind of hateful grudge against the Soggy Bottom Boys on account of their rough and rowdy past. Homer Stokes is the kind of fellow who wants to cast the first stone. Well, with you folks, I'm to forgive and forget Christian. And I say, if their rambunctiousness and misdemeanor is behind them, it is, ain't it, boys? Yes, sir, it is. Well, then I say, by the power vested in me, these boys is hereby pardoned.
That's Charles Durning, a really great, versatile actor, a really nice guy, and a patriotic American. We'll miss him. I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. And we're going to close with a brief profile of our final subject, Lee Dorman, who died recently at the age of 70. Lee Dorman was the bass player for Iron Butterfly. Iron Butterfly was a group formed in 1966 out of San Diego, and they only had one hit, but it was a huge hit. You don't hear much about Iron Butterfly anymore, but they were one of the first huge groups from the acid rock era. They were featured briefly at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and they were the opening act for a while for the Jefferson Airplane and the Doors. They were around for less than 5 years, but in those 5 years they sold over 7 million albums. The song we're going to hear to close sold 4 million copies by itself. Lee Dorman played bass on it. The full song is over 17 minutes long with a 2.5-minute drum solo. Been parodied on The Simpsons as a church hymn, and it was featured in the movie Manhunter with William Peterson. The serial killer played this song when he attempted to kill the policemen who were coming to arrest him. Check out Manhunter if you get a chance sometimes. Great movie. It's sort of a prequel for Hannibal Lecter to Silence of the Lambs. He's not the serial killer in the movie, but he is the one who the serial killer tries to contact as he tries to outsmart the police. They come, he's got a hostage, he's got a black light on, and the serial killer knocks out all the lights in the house. It's dark, they try to capture him, and the background music is this famous song by Iron Butterfly with Lee Dorman on the bass. Here is In-A-Gadda-Da-VITA. And where else are you going to get Robert Bork and In-A-Gadda-Da-VITA in the same program?
In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, honey. Don't you know that I'm loving you? In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, baby. Don't you know that I'll always be true?